Hey, I'm Allison. I'm a literacy specialist from Learning at the Primary Pond, and I have a little mini PD session prepared for you. I have been getting so many questions about how to launch literacy centers or like how to get set up for independent literacy work at the beginning of the school year. So I thought I would go live and just do a little bit of a mini PD. If you're joining me, I would love to know in the chat what grade you're teaching so that I can make sure that we talk about the specific grades that are represented here. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. I guess I should say before we get going, I am not necessarily like I have a system and I've done literacy centers in different ways, but what we're going to talk about can really apply to any way. It's not so much like you have to do centers this way. It's more of here is how my process is. Here is what I think about to stay organized, to be less stressed about getting this set up at the beginning of the year, because when we have littles, there's a lot to think about. There's just so many different things that they need to learn, their procedures, all that good stuff. So however you do centers, however you might need to do it with social distancing, this can definitely work for you. Awesome, Candy. Candy says, I teach kindergarten. Would love to know what the rest of you teach. I would also love to know too, has your school said anything about like social distancing? Do you know what you can and can't do with centers? That's always helpful to know too as I'm going through this. All right, so here's what's on our agenda. This little mini presentation is grouped into two main sections. In the first part of it, we will talk about planning and kind of thinking through how you want to run centers. And then the second main part, we'll talk about like the rollout process, specifically like what does that look like with your kids. And throughout that, I'll talk just about some tips for making it fun. And then I'll also share with you my literacy center bundles are on sale for 25% off right now. That's good through August 4th with the TBT sale. I did put a link in this post. If you can't find it, let me know and I can put it in a comment, but those are going to be on sale. Okay, Maria, another kindergarten teacher. Awesome. Who else do we have here? Are you social distancing? Do you know yet? Maybe you haven't heard. All right, so step one, the first main part is just advanced planning for centers. So again, this is where we're thinking through, we're kind of having a vision, like what do we want centers to look like eventually? So planning step A, first and foremost, you're gonna wanna decide how you run centers. And like I said, this is gonna vary. So you all may have different ways of running centers and that's great, but these are some things that you wanna think through and make plans for. So number one, of course, you need to know when your centers block is gonna take place, how long will it be? And I'm saying centers, but this could be daily 5, it could be stations, any kind of independent work. Number two, where will students do the activities? Are there going to be fixed centers, like they go here and it's the reading corner, or they go here and it's the writing center? Or are your kids going to be bringing materials back to their seats? Either can work. Maybe you can't have them in centers. Maria says, yes, we're social distancing in New York City at least 3 feet. So you, Maria, may have to have the kids bring stuff to their tables or somehow work out how to have areas that are social distanced. Always a challenge. Another thing to think about, will you have groups? Are you gonna have partners? Are the kids gonna work independently? I do like at least some partner work typically for like social interaction. Although again, I'm curious to see if you all know if you're social distancing or not yet, because that can affect things. Another thing to consider is just how will your students know what center to visit? Will they get to choose their centers, or will they get to choose the order that they do them in, right? Choice is so important. I think we all know that. It's very motivating for kids, but you probably do have an agenda of what you want them to do. So you can either allow them to choose activities to some degree, or you could allow them to choose the order that they do them in. Another question, how will you ensure that they do all the activities you need them to do? Are you gonna have like a must do, may do? I know some years what I've done is I had like a must do task or tasks, and then the kids after that could go to physical different centers. I've also done where everyone was just rotating and they were supposed to like choose from 2 different activities in each center. They rotated through the centers, and then I actually pulled guided reading groups or small group. They weren't the same as my center groups because I like mixed ability. But I would pull, one kid might be in the writing center, another kid might be in the reading center. I would pull kids from different groups. I actually have a blog post about that if you need help with that. I'm happy to share that. So these are all, again, just things that you want to think about. You want to imagine, what do your centers look like 6 to 8 weeks down the road? These questions are all helping you prepare your vision so that we can then work backwards. And I'll walk you through that working backwards part. Candy says, I have 4 tables, 1 being my teacher table for small groups, then 3 stations. Awesome. In person, not sure about details yet. Hey, Jamie. Jamie says, going back to kindergarten in a new district, exciting. So far, face-to-face with masks, also social distancing. Got it. Thanks for sharing that. Just curious where everybody's schools are at. So here are some more questions. And again, these are just things you're gonna have to think through and plan. How will your students change activities or rotate between centers? Is it that they finish, or is there a timer and everybody's rotating at once? I honestly think there's pros and cons to each. When you have a must do, may do, the nice thing about that is that they like finish their center at their pace, or not their center, but their assigned work at their pace. And then they can go and choose how long they spend in different centers or whatever. One nice thing about having them rotate on certain intervals is that you kind of, you have a little bit more control, and kids then aren't necessarily like spending way too long on something. So that's a benefit of that, but I've done both. Another question, what are they going to be doing in each center? You're going to want to, as you're making this plan, you may want to jot down notes. This should record, and it'll go onto the Learning at the Primary Pond Facebook page. You can come back to it, but you're going to want to list out, 6 to 8 weeks down the road, what activities are you going to want your kids to be doing? I recommend just making a big list. Really, I recommend making a big list of all of these things, again, so that you can work backwards. Another thing to think about, what are your expectations for behavior, noise level? What do you expect from your kids? What if they have to go to the restroom, or they need to get a drink? What if somebody's bothering them? Are you gonna have a leader? What if they don't know what to do? Visual directions, do I have that on the next slide? Yeah, okay, so one thing that can help with kids not knowing what to do is visual directions, especially at the K-2 level when they maybe are not as strong readers, or at least K-1. My literacy center bundles, those are the ones that I mentioned are on sale right now. Those all have the visual directions in them so that, even if kids can't read it, you will have done the activity with them prior to giving them the activity. And so then they have these little pictures as reminders. So I found these really helpful. So last question was just, again, what should students do if they don't know what to do? Are they allowed to interrupt you in your small group? Are they not allowed? Is there a leader? Should they ask somebody? So it's a lot of questions, I know. I'm just not going to answer these for you because I know that you have your own plan, or you will make one, right? You'll kind of envision, what do you want it to run? And here's the good thing about this, right? Every single year, no matter how long I've been teaching, I might set things up one way and make some small changes or big changes later. So don't feel like, especially if you're new to teaching or you're new to your grade level, don't feel like this has to be like engraved in stone. You can outline all of this stuff and make your plan and still have this system work. And then you can go back and make changes. So it's not a huge deal. Let's see. Sharing the literacy Avengers, I love it. That was a typo. Correspond with from sounds to spelling. So Sherry's asking about a couple of things. One thing is my phonics program, From Sounds to Spelling, and then another thing is the Literacy Center bundles. So From Sounds to Spelling will have stuff for phonics, phonological awareness, a little bit of vocabulary, and then the Literacy Center bundles have a lot more than that. There's stuff for like partner reading and a listening center if you have one. And there is WordWorks stuff that's very flexible and you can use along with From Sounds to Spelling. That'll work fine. But there's more, like comprehension and fluency depending on what grade level you're using. So From Sounds to Spelling is just phonics, phonological awareness, a little bit of handwriting, and then vocabulary. And then the Literacy Center bundles are like pretty much all areas of literacy, at least what kids can do on their own. Okay, so once you have all that, and obviously I'm walking you through these steps and I don't necessarily anticipate that you will have decided all of this now, although maybe you have already, amazing. The next thing that you're going to want to do as part of your planning is to choose literacy activities, and I actually mentioned this a little bit already, for students to eventually complete in center. So we're making our vision. Now, whatever you're having kids complete as practice, you'll know what that is, right? Or you'll come up with it. And it's not like you have to list out all of these for the entire year. You just need to, again, 6 to 8 weeks down the road, they need to have stuff to do in their centers. So it could be things like making words with magnetic letters. You know, if you're teaching kindergarten, I know we have a couple of kindergarten teachers here, maybe they're making alphabet letters with Play-Doh, stuff that they can do more than once, right? Reading independently, if they can read, responding to a book by writing or drawing. If you can do partner work, echo or choral reading. Echo would just be like the stronger reader reads a page first, and then the other reader reads the same page after them. Choral reading would be they read together. Again, this is with students who are actually reading. If you have like kindergartners or first graders, it may just be that they're retelling a story or something like that. Different ways to work with a partner. And I explicitly would model all that. Another thing like, okay, maybe you have a writing center. Well, how are they going to spell words independently if they're in first grade or up? Are there certain tools that you want to have them use so that they can be successful with spelling words? Just thinking along those lines. Maybe you're going to have them do a word sort as one of the activities, or maybe there's a certain game or type of game that they're going to play with a partner. So again, list out all the things that you intend to have them do, because we're going to work backwards in a minute. Awesome, Candy. Candy says using from sounds to spelling and also going to use the flexible shared reading. Yay, super. Okay, so I do want to mention too, if you have my Literacy Centers bundle, this work of thinking, like of planning what activities you're going to do, this work is actually done for you. So don't do it twice. So again, if you have my Literacy Centers bundle, that's the thing that's linked in this post. In the Start Here file for each individual center, because it's broken up into centers, there's going to be a sheet. And it will have like a suggested outline of the like for example, the partner reading activities throughout the year. Now you can deviate from this. You don't have to do this exactly as I have it outlined, but this is your list of activities, and this will inform what you're going to be teaching, what you're listing out here to help you with the rollout process. So again, if you have my Literacy Center bundles, don't do extra work. Look in the Start Here files, which there will be multiple ones, one for each center, and look for this long list because that will show you what the kids will be doing. Jody, so that Literacy Center bundles is different from the KLC. The KLC materials, you get new centers each month. And so the KLC does have visual directions. And with the KLC stuff, you can definitely use this process. You'll just have, other centers as well. Okay, let me know if that didn't answer your question, Jody. Next up, again, we're still planning. We're not actually rolling it out yet. We're gonna make a list of extremely simple activities and materials for mock centers. So when I'm having you do the rollout process, which I'll go through in a minute, there's gonna be a period of time where you're teaching kids the procedures for actually being in centers, like literally just how to rotate. What if you have to go to the bathroom? What if you don't know what to do? Like the very, very basics. And so when we're working on those procedures for the block, I want them to be able to do really, really simple stuff. So that simple stuff that you choose is gonna vary depending on what grade you teach. Could be just like play with pattern blocks, or maybe you have some of those mats. Any kindergarten teachers or first or even second grade teachers, I've used the mats with them too, where they're making, like little animals or whatever. Obviously it's not like literacy learning per se, but it's very simple. With my kinders, I like to have them string wooden beads. That's really good for fine motor. I might have them work on puzzles, maybe a really simple handwriting worksheet. I've done that a lot with like first grade, second grade at the beginning of the year because it's just so straightforward. Maybe you're going to be doing a craft and you want them to color cut materials or read or look at books or magazines, something with Play-Doh or magnetic letters. Basically, they're not going to be doing this stuff for super long, but you need some kind of like really basic stuff so that when they're practicing how centers work, they have things to do. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so all of that we have a plan for now, right? Or you will after we're done here. So you will have outlined what you want your centers to look like. You will have outlined what are kids eventually going to be doing in centers. So just list out all the different activities that you plan to have them do. And if you're trying to think of activities, think about skills too, right? Like what skills are you going to be covering? That's where your center activities are going to be coming from. We don't want them to be random. We want to think, okay, how are they going to practice fluency if it's like second grade? How are they going to practice phonics? How are they going to practice phonological awareness? Whatever. So make it based on the skills. So we've planned how we want centers to work, what activities they're going to be doing, and then we've also thought of some kind of like filler, really simple activities to just put in there when the kids are learning the procedures of centers. So now once you have your plan, you can actually start rolling it out with your kiddos. And this part has 4 stages. So in stage 1, and I have the little thing highlighted so you can see how we progress through the stages, the kids are learning simple literacy activities. And this is going to be about 2 to 4 weeks. I would say more like 4 weeks if you teach kindergarten. You know, if you have older kids, maybe you can spend like 2 weeks. So when you do this, and this would start basically at the beginning of the school year. To do this, you set aside your future centers block and you say, okay, this period of time, I don't know, 45 minutes, whatever, is going to be centers eventually. And you use that time period, not in the same way, but to build up to actually having your centers. So instead of having the kids in different groups or rotating or doing what they will eventually, instead, what you want to do is break that up into 2 what I call practice blocks. Maria says, yes, 4 weeks in kinder. It just takes them a while. You know, I'm not a believer in rushing into it because I feel like you're going to pay for it later. Like they need to learn those procedures. Okay, so 2 practice blocks, right? Let's say this was my block in kindergarten one year. Let's say that eventually your centers block is going to be 9:45 to 10:30. Okay, so during this rollout period, I'm going to break it up into 2 practice blocks. One practice block, 9:45 to 10:10. Another practice block, 10:10 to 10:30. Could you spend less or more time? Sure. This is just an example. So during each practice block, and this basically starts like day 2 of school because it's so simple, you're going to teach a mini lesson to show students a literacy activity. And then all the kids practice. So did I have an example here? Okay, yes, I do have an example. So let's go through what to do and then we'll look at the example. So during that practice block mini lesson, you're going to model the right way to do it. If you want, I don't do this in kindergarten, but if you want, you can involve kids in modeling the wrong way, and then you want to end on the right way again. So like, for example, if it's something as simple as, I don't know, like coloring with crayons, not really a literacy thing, but let's choose a different one. Let's do, I don't know, like making words with magnetic letters, right? So number 1, I like to give the kids a little time to explore them. So before I even do this, I might just give them some magnetic letters and like they get to make their name, they get to make whatever words they want. That makes it fun and it kind of gets their like sillies out, right? So when it's time to learn how to use the materials, hopefully they're not wanting to play as much. So anyway, I do have that like, you know, playtime, exploration time. It's short, but I think it's important. After that, if we're doing this during the practice block mini lesson, I'll model, okay, maybe I have my words on cards or I have them on this sheet and I'll model how to do it. I'll show them, here's how I take out the letters. Here's how I put them away in the right spots. Here's how I treat my letters well. I'm not going to leave them on the ground or the floor, anything like that. I don't put them in my mouth. So once you've gone through that, you model, have a child or 2 come up and again, like model making a word for the whole class. And then, you know, you could have them do the wrong way and then the right way again if you want to. The wrong way could just be something like, I don't know, they're like leaving letters on the floor or whatever. use those kids that like to be silly and goofy or maybe act out a little bit, and let them do it, right? Because you're intentionally having them model it the wrong way. That can be super fun for them. Okay, is there anything else? I feel like there was something else. Oh, okay. Am I gonna get to that? Okay, so one thing I didn't mention before we get into another example is just after you have this mini lesson, the kids actually get to practice. So once you've done that lesson, like with the magnetic letters that I was talking about, everybody in the class gets to make words with magnetic letters. Now, one thing that can be complicated is you might have enough materials for just one group and not the whole class, right? Because if you're thinking about a center, there may be things that you have enough for like 6 kids, but you don't have them for the whole class. When it's something like that, what I will do is have the kids just go do something else, and then I'll pull small groups and I'll just rotate through, having them, make the magnetic letters or make the words with magnetic letters with me. So ideally, all the kids can practice at the same time, but if you don't have enough materials, you can do like a really modified, just like rotate through group so that everybody gets to practice. The purpose of them practicing this is so that they can then eventually do it on their own in centers. So here's another example of what this time might look like. Again, we are talking at the beginning of the school year, starting like day 2 for the first 2 to 4 weeks. By the way, if you're just joining me now, I would love to know what grade you're teaching. I have a lot of kindergarten teachers, got a few other in here, but I would love to know what grade you're teaching, and also if you have to follow social distancing requirements. Okay, so here's another example. So let's say in practice block 1, that first part of the 45 minutes or whatever you have set aside, I model how to choral read with a partner. This would be for kids that can read already, right? So maybe like, I don't know, 1st grade or 2nd grade. So choral reading is just they read together. May or may not be a good example for this year, but in an ordinary year, I like partner reading. So I'm going to model it. And then of course I, have another student or pair of students model for the class. And then I pair up all the kids, I give them books and they practice. So they are practicing. I'm not pulling small groups. I'm available to go around and give them feedback. I'm giving them tons of positive feedback. Oh, I noticed so-and-so doing this. I noticed so-and-so doing that. Another thing that I really love to do, this is simple, but it's so fun. I will take photos of the kids doing it correctly. So during this practice block, as they're learning, when I see that they're doing it correctly, I'll take photos. Number 1, it's super fun. Like if you put it up on the interactive board or something for them to see photos of themselves and their friends. And number 2, if you want to have like visual reminders of how to do different activities, you can then use those photos, like print them out or whatever, even just on like a Word doc and paste them and print them out. And then when the kids are actually in centers on down the road, they will have those photos to remember what your expectations are. So consider taking some photos if you can. Marie says 1st grade, social distancing. Rosemary, also 1st grade, social distancing. Got some grade 2s, awesome. A good mix, virtual only, subbing all grades. Wow. Wearing masks and some distancing, nothing confirmed yet. Okay, so that might be like, 20 minutes. It's not very long. Next up, practice block 2 for the next 20 minutes. Maybe we are working on picture sorts, and that's something they're gonna be doing eventually. So I will model how to complete it. I'm gonna pick a picture sort that has very few pictures so that it doesn't take them very long, right? And then I'll have students complete the same, yes, picture sort independently, practicing their expectations. Why is it the same one? Isn't that silly? Yes, good question. The reason why it's the same one is because you're not trying to get them to practice literacy skills. You're trying to get them to practice things like cutting efficiently, using the glue stick correctly, turning in their work where they're supposed to. You're worried about that, not so much the actual, like, can they sort words that start with CH versus SH, okay? So this is all, again, about learning the stuff that they will eventually be doing in centers. Thanks for sharing that, guys. So interesting to see what everybody is doing or what they think they might be doing. All right. So, like I said, do this 2, 3, 4 weeks until all your kids can read independently, if they can read, right? And do all other starting literacy center activities you listed in planning step B. So, if you were with me earlier on, if you weren't, by the way, this should post to the page. You can watch it later, but we planned out, right? We said, oh, we want them to make words with magnetic letters. We want them to partner read, independent read. We want them to do whatever else, right? So we know what we're aiming toward, and spend your 3 to 4 weeks teaching the kids how to do that stuff. Okay, now we're going to move into stage 2. At this point, the kids know how to do lots of different activities, or at least, a good number, but what they don't know is your procedures and your expectations for actually being in centers. So you did list that out in part 1 of this presentation, right? You already listed that, but they don't know, again, what do they do when they need to go to the restroom? How do they rotate? Is there like a cleanup signal that you have? If you have physical centers, like how are the materials stored? How do they put them away? What if they run out of stuff? These are all the things that we're going to work on now. Okay, so 2, 3, 4 weeks into the school year, we're going to start teaching center-specific expectations. And again, you listed out that stuff already, or you will after our presentation here. So at this time, you're going to put the kids in what I call mock centers. So if they are rotating, they're actually going to be in their groups, their future groups, and they're going to be moving around, or they're going to be at their seat getting materials from certain places. So now you're going to teach them things: noise level, where to get materials, have to go to the bathroom, what if you don't know what to do, what if someone's bothering you, all those things to help them problem solve, you're teaching them now. So they're in their mock centers, right? And your focus is on procedures. So again, center material locations, how to know where to go, your cleanup expectations, behavior expectations, cleanup signal, how and when to rotate, bathroom and drink breaks, all of these like logistics things. So did I mention it? Okay. So one thing that I didn't mention yet about this stage is in mock centers, the kids are not actually doing the activities that you've taught them. If you remember, if you were with me at the very beginning of the presentation, I was talking about like having almost filler activities for the kids to do. They can be literacy related, but they shouldn't be hard. It should be very simple. Like, look at these magazines. I had like a bunch of like old like Ranger Rick or National Geographic kids. I'm just thinking of that. Like make letters with Play-Doh, depending on what grade you have. So these are very, 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 very basic things, because in stage 2, you are still available and you're having the kids physically in centers. You're teaching them how to rotate, but you're there to provide feedback, and you're not pulling small groups. So we'll talk about timing on this, but this stage is pretty short. And you want to stay in this stage until they have the procedures down pretty well. Because in the next stage, you're going to be bringing in the actual literacy practice activities. Okay, you're going to be putting it all together. So you don't want to throw too much at them until they really do have the procedures down and they know your expectations. All right, so in stage 3, now they know literacy activities to do. Now they know how to rotate through centers, the actual procedures. So now we're going to put that together. I recommend opening your centers one by one if you have like different centers, different activities. If you do must do, may do, you might not need to structure it quite like this, but at least with kindergarten, when I have had, physical centers, I recommend opening just one at a time. So you can see on Monday, oh, boys and girls, like, this center is open, so exciting. Like, I just make it a big deal. And then the rest of the centers, at least with kindergarten, with first and second graders, you might be able to speed it up a little bit, but they're play-based, right? Very simple. On Tuesday, both center number 1 and center number 2, they're open. Everything else is really simple, but these centers are functioning just like you normally would have them. So open them one at a time if you teach kindergarten. Maybe you can do 2 at a time if you teach first and second grade, but you're gradually having them put all these skills together. Okay. So we pretty much covered that. So now stage 4, Our kids know what to do in centers. They know activities to do. They're up and running. Now, before I talk about timing, I do want to mention at this point in the year, you can start pulling your small groups. Yay! One thing I would caution is not to rush into this. In stage 3, what I like to do is I actually like to have them in centers doing their activities, but then I take a day or two to step back and watch. So the centers block might not be as long as it normally is quite yet, and that's okay. You can work up to it. But I step back and watch, and their job is to work on their activities, and I want to see how independent they can be. Because before I start pulling small groups, I want to see, are they still like running up to me? Are they, not getting along well? Like, I need to see how they're really going to do. So I take a day or two to be available to them, and always lots of like positive reinforcement. You can graph how long they work independently. You can do all kinds of fun stuff. Take those photos, like I mentioned, really celebrate how they're doing. But stand back and watch, see how they do, because when you get to stage 4, you truly want them to be ready so that you don't have to go backwards and you can really focus on your small groups. All right, so 4 stages, and I just want to go over timing a little bit. So the first stage is just those essential literacy activities. You're teaching them one by one, giving the kids practice. Take 2 to 4 weeks to do that. Stage 2, center-specific procedures, routines, logistics type stuff. Take a week in kindergarten. First, second grade, you could maybe use a little bit of less time. Then I recommend opening each center one at a time. Make it fun, make it a celebration, right? That could be 1 week or less. And then hopefully you can stay in stage 4 for the rest of the year. But after the holiday break, or should things become difficult, you can go back, right? Like, we all know that kids need reteaching sometimes. So maybe you have to reduce their choices, or maybe you have to close some of the centers and reopen them as you reteach. So don't be afraid to go backwards, but hopefully if you invest the time here, it should definitely pay off. All right. So I also mentioned that I have some literacy center bundles that can be those activities that you're teaching your kiddos. And right now, if you're here with me live, I am doing a 25% off sale in my TPT store. Actually, the whole TPT site is on sale. And so these bundles for kindergarten, first, and second grade are all discounted through the end of tonight. I think it's, midnight Eastern. So that link is in the post. Let me know if you don't see it. And so let me just kind of tell you the centers that I've used. And if you use the bundles, you don't necessarily have to use these same centers. You could do something different. You can take the materials and use them in different ways. But I have TPT hasn't loaded today. Somebody else said that TPT was down. Definitely keep trying. Maybe they would extend it a day. I don't know. But definitely keep trying if it is down. Thanks, Elizabeth. So I'll have some kind of independent reading center usually. Sometimes it's nice to have everybody reading independently at the same time for that quiet time. And one challenge with like kinder first grade is they really can't read much. So I would say like use this as appropriate. You might have another time in the day that you prefer to do it instead. Because I guess like for me, sometimes the classroom feels a little bit noisier and busier during centers, whereas like if everybody's independent reading at the same time, it can be a little quieter. I also like to do a partner reading center. Again, don't know how practical that is for this school year, but ordinarily once the kids can read or even just retell stories together, that's great. Such a big part of literacy is like oral language and conversation. Let me know in the chat if your school really emphasizes that or not, because I feel like oral language just gets left behind so much, but something like a partner reading center is really good for developing that oral language. I also have, that's sweet, Heather says, last year I had the kids read to a stuffed animal. Love it. That's a perfect way to like use the partner reading materials and still have them do it. I think I actually, now that I think of it, even in the independent reading center, I'm pretty sure I have stuff like specifically to have them read to a stuffed animal, now that I think about it. Another center that you might do, I don't start with this in kinder at the beginning of the year, but you can have a reading response center. So they could be responding either to books that they read if they can read, or to books that you would be reading aloud. So you might do a read aloud and then you put the book in the center and then they're like writing and drawing about it. My partner reading center actually has these like videos that the kids can watch that go over what the prompt is in case they forget what they're supposed to write about. So the literacy center bundles have that. If you want to have a listening center, I love Epic. But of course, I've done everything from, cassette tapes. I don't know if people still do that anymore, but cassette tapes a long time ago. You could have them listen to stuff on Epic, which is free. Go to getepic.com if you have not checked it out yet, because it is amazing. So that could be good for a listening center. I like to always have a word work center. In kindergarten, I actually double up. So at the very beginning of the year, I'll do 2 word work centers, and the word work is like phonological awareness and phonics. First grade, you might want to double up as well. Amazing, Cheryl. Cheryl says, I have this. I have printed everything and laminated it. Woohoo! That must be a good feeling. If you want to do a writing center, this doesn't substitute for your writing instruction. I still think it's important to have a writing block and have like a mini lesson and everybody write, but maybe there's something that's connected. Maybe you're writing personal narratives, in, I don't know what, your normal writing block, and then you're doing some other sort of narrative writing. Maybe the kids are like, I don't know, doing anything from like making comic strips to, they could make little stories with little like toys, have them, move them around, storytelling, writing, or drawing about it, whatever works for you. The Literacy Center bundles have tons of ideas and resources in them, everything from like postcards to like they're making recipes, just all kinds of engaging things. And then normally, I like to, in kindergarten, do a dramatic play literacy center. I don't always do this during my normal centers block. Let me know in a comment if you do use a dramatic play center. This COVID situation has kind of put a kibosh on a lot of like play stuff, but I think, again, that's great for just play in general, their development and their oral language. Anyway, I don't think I finished my thought. I don't necessarily always include the dramatic play center as part of literacy centers. I will typically have play centers in kindergarten in the afternoon, and that's when I use it, but it's totally up to you. Let's see. Jamie says, whole day is structured around oral language. That's awesome. That's really cool. Maria says, we couldn't last year, might be the same this year. Susan says, yes. Okay, so these are just some photos of some materials from the Literacy Center bundles. There's so much in here. These have been kid tested, right? Real kids have used these, enjoyed them. A lot of teachers use these with their kiddos, and it's just creative stuff, right? Because you want to have activities that feel new and fresh to the kids, but that also aren't like a ton of work for you to set up. With the Word Work Center, now I know that different teachers have different phonics programs or maybe spelling lists, right? With kindergarten, they're pretty much, they're practicing the alphabet, maybe CBC words, some phonological awareness. So I do have activities in the kindergarten word work part of the Literacy Center bundle, but especially for 1st and 2nd grade, you may have words that you want kids to practice, whether you use From Sounds to Spelling, My Phonics program, or something else. And so the games are designed so that kids can use their own words. All you would need is for the kids to have like a list of the words. Sometimes you would need individual cards with the words, which is pretty easy to set up. The kids can even make them. But then you can take your words and have them play the games. So it's kind of hard to visualize because a lot of time phonics games will have words on them, but these are different. So you get to choose, you get to differentiate if you want, use your own words with the word work activities. So one thing I did as part of these Literacy Center bundles is there's consistent games where like this spell and score game is one type of game. So they learn how to do it, but then I have different themes. So there's like a fall theme, and then you bring it back for St. Patrick's Day or whatever. There's seasonal little things, couple of holidays. You can just do seasonal if you can't celebrate holidays in the classroom. But basically my point is that you teach the rules once, and then you keep things fresh by giving them the different themes. Okay, so differentiation 2 with the Literacy Center bundles, it's done for you. This is like a really, right here. This is like a zoomed in part of the lesson plans because you get lesson plans to help you release, to help you teach each of these activities. And there's always differentiation options for you. And many times I also gave you materials to just print and use. So you don't have to make anything else. You can choose to have different activities for different kids if you want to. There's just like a ton of options. I should also say, if you have these, don't expect to necessarily use all the literacy centers in a year. If you do, that's amazing. But I intentionally put more in there than you would need, because I just wanted you to have choices, and I wanted you to see like what your kids enjoy the most and what fits best with your curriculum. So there is more in there than you will probably use, just a heads up. Okay, so another thing that we talked about earlier is how important it is for kids to actually know what to do in their centers, right? So I mentioned the visual directions. The Literacy Center bundles do have all of those visual directions for every single activity. And then let me see, can I zoom in here? Yes, I can. Okay, so in the writing center, like I said, we have all different kinds of fun activities, like make a postcard, do this. And with the writing center in particular, I felt like kids really needed to see examples. So what I do is I make this binder of examples, and I have this for you, like you just printed out. But what I did is I made an example. I took photos so the kids can see exactly what they're supposed to do. And then there's like ideas and tips for them. Everything is visual. So if your kids aren't reading yet, you can still make use of this. But the writing center in particular, I always feel like examples are important. So that's why, instead of the visual directions, we actually have this writing center binder. So you just, maybe they have two choices in the writing center. You just have like a really small binder and you print out this stuff that's in the bundle, and then they can look at it and choose what they want to do, and then also know what to do. And okay, so when I was planning these, I was thinking about like my own struggles with finding literacy centers. Let me know if you relate to this in the chat. You kind of feel like you're on a hamster wheel. So before I became a literacy specialist in the classroom, I would have this like list of things, I think on like a whiteboard or something, and I do them every week to prep. So some of that's normal, right? Like you just got to make copies. You just got to, make the parent newsletter, whatever. But especially with literacy centers, like every week it was like, find stuff or whatever. So I'd be like, oh my gosh, like what are we going to do? And it's kind of a constant hamster wheel. Let me know if you relate to that. Just looking here, looking there. After Pinterest was invented, I'd be like looking on Pinterest. It takes time to find all of this stuff. And so one big reason why I created these bundles is just so that we can have a plan, right? We can know, hey, these are the activities we're going to be teaching for literacy centers. That'll help you with your planning, like we've talked about today. And it'll just help you stay on track throughout the year, because some thought should go into your choosing of centers, right? You want to think, like I said, okay, I need to work on fluency, or I need to work on this. And so it's easy for that connection to skills to get lost if you're on this hamster wheel. Elizabeth says, absolutely. Maria says, yes, planning takes a lot of time. Glad you guys relate to that. If you're like randomly pulling stuff, which we all do it sometimes, we're maybe not as focused on what skills do we want our kids to work on. And so when you have resources all in one place and you're not searching for them, that allows you to A, have more time for yourself, always a good thing. B, focus on what skills you want to cover in your centers. And C, also differentiate, because like I said, there's a lot of options here. All right, well, hope this was helpful. Again, that discount on the literacy centers, I put the link up there in this post. If you're watching this after the fact, they'll still be in my TPT shop. The 25% off, smush those words together, 25% off is good through tonight, August 4th, 2021. So if you've been thinking about them, make sure to grab them for the discount. I hope that this was helpful. Just to kind of recap, if you're just joining us now, maybe just popping in, we talked about what you want to do to plan in advance for centers. And then we also talked about the center rollout process. So if you need to go back, assuming this is recording correctly right now, this should be posted to my Facebook page. So you can go back and rewatch, because I know it was a lot of information. But I hope that you will take the time to list all this stuff out because it will take so much stress off of you. Because I don't know about you, but it can be a lot just thinking about like, what are all these things, little things I need to teach them for centers. So this can really help you have a plan. Awesome. Elizabeth says, can't wait to purchase this bundle for grade 2. Yay. Sherry says, not a silly question. Is this American? Yeah, so it uses US American English. So I forget, did you say you're in Canada? I don't know. Sherry, you can look at the skills on the product page and kind of see if it's a good fit or not for you. And look at the previews too to make sure it's a good fit. Oh, reading levels. Okay, got you. I would say this is not super tied to reading levels in general. You would have the kids reading books, and there's, the literacy center materials are just things like, I don't know, they might be choosing a book to read together, or, they're practicing their words. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily like tied to specific reading levels. It's pretty flexible that way. All right, you all. Hopefully I did not miss any questions. I'll scroll up and make sure that I didn't. Elizabeth, I just want to call out your comment because I love that. She says, I've had grade 6 students record themselves reading for a reading pal in my grade 2 class. My students see those older kids as superstars. I love that. Just wanted to call that out because that is super awesome. All right, you all. Well, feel free to leave more questions. I can always come back and answer them later. Don't forget about the TBT sale, August 4th, last day for it. Thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful. And again, feel free to leave me any questions if you have them. Bye, everybody.